Hello, and welcome to our informal debate addressing Tele-ABA and in-home ABA therapy. My name is Dana Seaton, and I'm the introducer for our group. This is Omar.
Hello.
And he will serve as our summarizer for each point made during the debate, including arguments and counter-arguments for each side of the debate. This is Julie.
Hello.
And she is our researcher. She will present applicable research relevant to each point in the debate to ensure that each statement is evidence-based. Nora.
Hi.
She is our illustrator, and she will be presenting visual supports throughout the debate in order to facilitate a more clear understanding of the points made. This is Michelle.
Hi.
And she is our fielder. She will make note of any questions that are likely to arise throughout. She will present more questions at the end of the presentation. Now, to begin our debate, why are we talking about the importance of this service modality for people with autism? According to the CDC in 2012, 1 in 68 children are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. If you take a look here right at this map, you can see the amount of variability from state to state in the number of BCBAs. Idaho has less than 1 BCBA for every 100,000 people in their population, as opposed to Massachusetts with 20 to 21 BCBAs per 100,000 population. This demonstrates a major issue in providing evidence-based intervention to individuals with autism in a more rural area. So, Tele-ABA in our modern service modality that may be new to many people in the field of ABA. Have you heard of it? It is when an analyst provides the same kind of evaluations and therapy that would be conducted in an office or clinic, but through live video conferencing. This new service modality attempts to bridge the gap in serving those who live in more rural areas and may not otherwise receive ABA therapy. We have identified some arguments in support for Tele-ABA and in-home therapy, and we focus on these points and their counter-arguments in this debate. In support of Tele-ABA services, we note that these services are typically more accessible to families, including those in the regions where ABA services are limited and those that require a more cost-effective way to obtain services. However, the resources needed for Tele-ABA therapy might not be accessible to everyone due to the lack of resources. Further, privacy and security concerns arise in utilizing teleservices. Another key point in support of Tele-ABA is that the initial social validity ratings for use of this method are high, with parents reporting high satisfaction and initial reports of success with their children. However, use of self-report in addition to ethical codes related to boundaries of competence and treatment efficacy codes raise red flags with these initial reports of success. In support of home-based ABA therapy, we discuss the benefit perceived by parents when this form of therapy is utilized. However, many families view in-home therapy as intrusive, and the importance of trust in the specific therapist is critical to building the necessary therapeutic relationship. In further support of in-home services, there is a strong empirical support for its effectiveness. However, despite the research and support, the match between therapist and client is crucial, and high therapist turnover rate is associated with this form of therapy. Additionally, there will sometimes be a lack of sufficient training and treatment fidelity checks when greater resources are needed to implement the therapy itself. Now, Omar will present our first point in support of Tele-ABA, greater accessibility of services.
One point that has been cited in support of telehealth ABA services is their ability to provide services to regions and families that would not otherwise have access to ABA therapy. ABA services are now on the rise, and these services are the primary treatment method for children with autism. However, providing these services can be challenged because of the daily demands, schedules, and wait lists for home intervention. Telehealth has been suggested as a viable alternative for in-home services. as they can deliver quality service in real time over large geographical distance. Julie will share research studies to show how implementing an intervention via telehealth has had positive results for behavior deceleration, skill acquisition, and clinical fidelity. She'll also share how telehealth services provide a more cost-effective alternative to in-home services.
As Omar pointed out, Vismara, Young, and Rogers completed a single-subject, multiple baseline design study in 2012 that used telehealth to deliver a parent intervention program with 12 one-hour-per-week sessions to the parents of 9 children with autism spectrum disorders. This study was an attempt to move procedures from clinic-based programs into the home setting by using video conferencing and a DVD training video to provide materials and coaching for the parents. The study aimed to prove that using telehealth as a parent intervention would be feasible to conduct with increased parent fidelity, learning from the child, and parental acceptance. Parents were able to achieve fidelity within 6 weeks of starting the intervention and maintaining it follow-up. As the parents' fidelity increased, their ratings of attentiveness, responsiveness, sensitivity, enthusiasm to their child's needs, and communicative behaviors increased as well. Parents reported that the DVD and video conferencing were easy to use and offered support without needing a therapist present. They indicated that they enjoyed being able to show everyday moments in their home to the therapist and felt like more opportunities for learning and behaviors could be addressed during intervention. In addition, Wacker et al. 2013 conducted a study that used behavior consultants to conduct functional analysis through telehealth. The participants included 20 children with autism spectrum disorders that showed problem behaviors and lived an average of 222 miles away from the hospital where the behavior consultants were located. The parents of the participants conducted all procedures during weekly telehealth consultations in the clinics located near the participants. Parent assistants were trained by the behavior consultants to provide on-site support for families during consultations, including preparing session materials and providing physical assistance with the participant as needed. The results of the FA showed that environmental variables were maintaining the problem behavior for 18 of the 20 participants. Not only do the results of this study show that FAs can be conducted effectively via telehealth, it is at a much reduced cost. The cost of delivering FAs through telehealth is significantly lower than conducting services in the participants' homes when factoring in transportation and the clinician's time. The Wacker et al. 2012 study used a non-concurrent multiple baseline design to examine functional communication training conducted by parents of 17 young children with autism spectrum disorders that matched the function of the problem behavior that was identified after first conducting FAs with telehealth consultation. The behavior analyst provided coaching via telehealth from over 200 miles away from the regional clinic sites where the procedures were conducted by the parents. Parent assistants were trained to assist the families at the local sites during weekly 60-minute visits. The results showed at least a 68.7% reduction in targeted problem behavior, and most showed over 90% reduction. A comparison of FCT cost was estimated using parents' travel, 1 hour for the behavior consultant, and 90 minutes for the parent assistant to conduct the weekly session. Omar also mentioned that in-home telehealth services were most affordable when compared with in-home and clinic-based telehealth services, according to a study by Lindgren et al. Lindgren et al. Compared data from outcomes and costs for the ABA procedures conducted, including FAs and FCT, to reduce problem behavior using 3 different delivery methods, including in-home therapy, clinic-based telehealth, and home-based telehealth. They used analysis from 94 children diagnosed with autism or neurodevelopmental disorders. The results indicated success in reducing problem behaviors from all 3 methods. They then calculated costs for staff, facility, and the family to implement the procedures, including travel time and equipment costs. Telehealth had the lowest cost and was significantly less than in-home therapy, with staff costs being the highest. Nora will further illustrate this point.
Yeah, so here we can see the weekly cost comparisons for the studies that Julie just talked about. And on the left, you can see the significant savings that were found in the study conducted by Wacker and colleagues. Up on the top left there, you can see the functional communication training weekly cost for telehealth was only $58 as opposed to the in-home FCT, which was $335 a week. And then below that, you can see that the weekly cost of the FA was just $60 as opposed to the $291 per week for the FA to be conducted in home. And then over on the right, you can see that Lindgren and colleagues also found some significant cost savings with home telehealth services compared to the other two service delivery methods. And now Michelle's going to jump in with a question that is begged when we're discussing this point.
Okay, so we have provided evidence that Tele-ABA services are more cost effective, but then the question remains, how does funding work? And are the insurance companies on board with covering these services? Medicaid covers ABA services in 48 states and Washington, D.C. And then in terms of private insurance, a broad mandate does require some telehealth services, but ABA service coverage mandates then vary by state. So currently 32 states and DC have a private payer policy for such services, but of course then coverage varies by state laws and conditions of coverage. The link provided gives a good overview of coverage for Tele-ABA services. And now Omar will present a counterpoint for this argument.
Despite the apparent accessibility of telehealth ABA services, there are also some distinct counterpoints that must be addressed. First, a lack of resources may restrict its use. All families may not have a laptop computer, access to high-speed internet, or the technological knowledge necessary to access telehealth services. Another distinct challenge is ensuring that the hardware and software used by families comply with HIPAA regulations. Lee and colleagues in their 2014 publication talk about privacy issues that could be violated if practitioners do not provide software/hardware that is HIPAA compliant. The risk of violating HIPAA compliance laws are even greater when video conferencing software such as Skype are utilized. Additionally, equipment that meets HIPAA compliance oftentimes requires high bandwidth speeds, which, as I noted previously, all families do not have access to.
So in Lee et al., the researchers summarized the technical systems that were needed to develop a telehealth service and the problems they had. They then provided some guidelines for how to troubleshoot each problem. They compared the technology needs from clinic to clinic setup to clinic to home. The researchers discovered that they had to focus on the technology aspects of telehealth because each home had different equipment needs. The biggest difference with clinic to home setup was the problem with securing a firewalled and encrypted connection, additional hardware needs, and the need to install antivirus software on the family's laptops. Along with the initial setup, they discovered technical problems with audio and video transmission, including delays, freezing, trouble hearing, and connection or hardware issues. The researchers recommended including one person on each provider team that had the skills needed to troubleshoot technical issues, or if one was not available, to hire IT support.
So here we can see that Lee and colleagues in their 2015 study, they provided us with the equipment needs to conduct telehealth services on both the provider and the client end. And as you can see, these needs include software, hardware, and connectivity. And so this visual is really critical in demonstrating the extra steps required in implementing telehealth services. And something else important that I want to note here is that the upfront costs of setting up these services can be very significant. And that seriously challenges the pro Tele-ABA point that such services are more cost effective. And we have another illustration here from that same study by Lee and colleagues. And these are just a few of the questions that are asked of families up front before the telehealth services can even begin. You can take a look at those questions, and some of them are pretty straightforward, like, do you have internet? But others, like, who is your ISP? How much RAM does your computer have? These are questions that a lot of families might not know. And so the visual shows some potential for a lot of pressure to be placed on families to meet the technology standards before they can even have telehealth services implemented.
The second important point in support of Tele-ABA services is that parents who have used it report initial success and satisfaction with the use of these methods. Given the importance of social validity when implementing ABA services, parent satisfaction ratings are of great value. Further, initial data supports its use. According to the ACB Ethical Code 2.09, clients have the right to effective treatment, so initial empirical support for the use of more accessible service delivery methods is important. And survey conducted by Carvaco and colleagues show a strong clinical and parent fidelity compared to face-to-face treatment. Most of the subjects who participated in the survey scored clinical fidelity and satisfaction at over 90%. Additionally, data shows that intervention provided via telehealth was successful in increasing skill acquisition and lowering problem behaviors.
So in this study by Carvaco and colleagues, the COMPASS model was used to facilitate collaboration between therapist and parent through direct training and support for the intervention being conducted by the parents. This study assessed the intervention's effects on decreasing problem behavior and parent stress and increasing parents' competency level and parent satisfaction compared to their pre-test scores in a control condition. They also examined the effectiveness of C-HOPE using a telehealth delivery model to support families from rural and underserved areas. The study was conducted over 18 months at 4 sites, including university and rural sites. The parents were assigned randomly to one of 3 treatment conditions: face-to-face, telehealth, or waitlist control. Results showed significant post-test treatment effects on problem behavior, parents' competency, and stress level of parents. Results for the telehealth condition showed significant pre-post test changes in comparison to the control, especially for problem behavior, the problem behavior category.
So here we can see data from that Carvaco and colleagues study that Julie and Omar just talked about. And in addition to the success in decreasing problem behavior, this telehealth model produced pretty high parent satisfaction rates. And this graph compares the parents' report of satisfaction in both the face-to-face training, which you can see in the blue bars there, and the telehealth training, which is in orange. And as you can see, there is virtually no difference between the satisfaction rates of the two. And as Omar pointed out earlier, Tele-ABA services are much more accessible. So the fact that social validity is just as high as in-home, this data does give significant support for utilizing telehealth services. And now Omar will share a counter argument to this point.
A few issues arise when parent satisfaction and reports of effectiveness are used to support use of telehealth ABA services. First, parents self-reported, which calls into question the validity of these reports. Additionally, given the parents are implementing services without an in-person trainer, there was nothing to verify their reports of success. The BACB Code of Ethics also needs to be considered when Tele-ABA services are utilized. Code 1.02 addresses practicing within boundaries and competence, which raises a question: are behavior analysts trained to provide telehealth services? Further, Code 1.209 addresses treatment and intervention efficacy. Clients have a right to effective treatment that is based in the research literature and then adapted to the individual client. Behavior analysts always have the obligation to advocate for and educate the client about scientifically supported, most effective treatment procedures. Effective treatment procedures have been validated as having both long-term and short-term benefits to the client and society. Given that these services are relatively new in ABA, it is difficult to know what the actual long-term benefits of these treatments are.
Okay, so in the Heitzman, Powell, Buzzhart, Rosinko, and Miller 2013 study, they evaluated the feasibility of using a parent training program for parents of children with autism called OASIS. The program was implemented from a distance. Each family completed the pre and post test from the OASIS training program. The OASIS training program has 8 modules to be completed. Each module included online activities and participation in distance coaching sessions. Although their results showed significant increases in the knowledge and skills gained from pre-test to post-test, parents' lowest performance occurred with the introduction of the principles of reinforcement, punishment, and the 3-term contingency. There were also significant variation in the parents' performance across the different skill domains. Empirical studies of the effectiveness of this training program and others are still needed. Jane, Dixon, Tarbox, Granpucci, Kornak, and Knocker 2012 conducted a study to evaluate the effectiveness of an e-learning program to train family members on children with ASD and applied behavior analysis principles and procedures. There were 28 participants, including the randomized waitlist controlled between group study. The trained group scored significantly higher than the waitlist control group at post-test. The control group then received training and also showed significant gains. One possible limitation of e-learning training is that there were no trainings on practical implementation of the knowledge they gained. The study states that the e-learning training is not intended to replace hands-on training by an expert.
Okay, so it is important to remember that, as Omar and Julie pointed out, that Curve-Cal study showed that telehealth was successful in those instances. However, it is important to note that this research is new, and so findings need to be replicated in order to be reliable. So let's look at some points in support of in-home ABA services and their counterpoints. And Omar will present the first point.
When looking at in-home ABA services, parents perceive socially significant benefits of these services. Several parents have reported a high satisfaction rate with in-home based services. In the study conducted by Grindle and colleagues, parents reported that in-home services have made a dramatic impact in family life, particularly in terms of more manageable family outings and skills they had learned in order to deal with the problem behaviors in public. In addition to high satisfaction rate, parents also reported an increase in skill acquisition amongst their children, notably an increase in communication, social, and adaptive skills.
Listen, so in the Grindle, Cogshaw, Hastings, and Remington 2008, they used a semi-structured format to interview 53 parents of children that received 2 years of early intensive behavioral interventions to find out their perception of the benefits and difficulties of conducting an in-home program. They also wanted to know on the families' lives and their support systems. The study listed some practical benefits for the child and the parents. Some of the benefits for the child include increased language and communication skills, increased social skills, and increased play skills. Some of the benefits for the parents included more support in the home, free time when the child and parents learn more about ABA.
So here on this graph, we can see the benefits of the in-home services as reported by the mothers and fathers. And you can see the mothers are illustrated in the blue bars and the fathers in the orange. And this is from the Grindle and colleagues study that Julie was just talking about. And as you can see, 100% of the mothers and fathers did see a practical benefit to their child with autism. And they also reported pretty high rates of practical benefit for themselves as parents, and then also the siblings. And on the right side here, you can see some actual quotes that were found in the study. And a parent said of their child with autism, "He has learned to let people into the house now, and he is so friendly. As soon as he sees someone, he says, 'What's your name?'" And then below that, a parent said of the benefit for the siblings, the sibling has really benefited from the program. Now that she has started at school, she goes around to all the other children and says, "Hey, excellent work." You can tell it's what we have been telling her to say to her brother. So this data does give merit to in-home ABA therapy, but there is a counter argument that must be considered, and Omar will now discuss that.
Although families overall find in-home services to be very beneficial, ABA services can feel intrusive for many families. Because in-home ABA services requires a prior professional to go to the family's home, this can cause stress on the family. As a result of receiving services, caregivers may need to reschedule the daily routine and in-home dynamics. Additionally, building trust with a specific therapist providing service is extremely important. Because of the unreliability of some practitioners, family buy-in becomes difficult.
So in the same Grindle et al. Study, the parents cited difficulties with finding the right therapist to fit with their family, unreliability with the staff, high turnover rate, and the constant presence of a therapist in their home. The parents also stated that the stress level fluctuated with the program and did not consistently improve.
Okay, so it is interesting that the same study we looked at in the illustration before this one, the Grindle and colleagues study, it also gives some pretty negative reports from the parents regarding in-home ABA services. And the biggest issue reported was that 59% of mothers and 76% of fathers, which you can see on the right side of the bar graph there, they actually felt uncomfortable with the therapist's presence in the home. And on the right, you can see a quote from parents about their frustration with the therapist turnover. That's the quote that's on the top there. And then the bottom one, it's interesting because a parent actually said, your home is never your own, as there are always people trooping through it and in the most intimate way, and that they come into the bedrooms. This can obviously result in a pretty awkward situation for all involved. It's kind of like this scene from the show Cheers.
Okay, and so it's important to mention here that despite the possible stressors we discussed that are associated with those in-home supports, these might be outweighed by the stress of receiving no services at all. Although Tele-ABA could provide an alternative to in-home therapy, they are not always a realistic alternative for everyone that perceives in-home services as intrusive, and so not receiving those services could be an even greater stress. So now Omar will present our final point in support of home-based ABA therapy.
The most important point in support of home-based ABA services is the strong empirical support for its effectiveness. As stated previously, Code 209 states that clients have the right to effective treatment, and research to date provides significant empirical support for this method. Many studies have been conducted using a variety of experimental designs that show strong evidence in support for home-based services. Because of the large number of empirical home-based studies conducted, behavior analysts are able to advocate for the appropriate amount and level of service provision and oversight required to meet the defined behavioral change program goal, creating an effective treatment method.
In the Shine, Koff, and Siegel study, they examined the effects of intensive behavioral treatment on children with autism. The study compared two groups of children diagnosed with autism or PDD that were matched based on age, diagnosis, and length of treatment. This was part of a home that was implemented by the parents with assistance from community-based clinicians. The control group received treatment in a school-based, one-on-one intervention setting. The experimental group received a higher number of hours of intervention compared to the control group. The parents reported that they used therapy based on methods from Lobos. There was no difference in the pre-treatment IQ level between groups. The results of the experimental significant treatment IQ scores in the control group. There are also some significant effects on symptom severity found.
Okay, so here's an illustration to kind of illustrate the data from the study that Julie just talked about. So this is from the Shine, Koff, and Siegel study. And the line graphs presented here display the gains in IQ scores, that's the one on the left, and then the decreases in the symptom presentation, that's the line graph on the right there. And as you can see, the in-home ABA services were found to create much more significant results than the control group. And here's Michelle with a question that comes up related to this data.
Yeah, so one question that might arise here is that we already discussed how telehealth services have that initial research to support effectiveness. And it is noted that both methods do have empirical support, but support for in-home therapy dates back 2 decades and has been replicated numerous times, whereas telehealth services are somewhat new. And so the reliability of initial findings is not as great as that of in-home ABA services. Additionally, because it is new, we don't have any long-term studies to know whether this treatment modality is effective in the future. And so Omar will present our final counterpoint.
A few factors arise that could impact the effectiveness of in-home ABA services. High therapist turnover is inherent in this type of treatment. Additionally, the importance of effectively matching therapists to clients is a crucial component and does not always occur. Further, a lack of treatment fidelity checks used in in-home therapy, as well as the training issues, are often characteristics of in-home therapy.
So in the same Grindle et al. Study, they included some other difficulties with in-home therapy. Many of the difficulties included problems with the therapist, but the parents also stated difficulties with funding for ABA services, administrative difficulties such as creating programming materials, and difficulties for the siblings of the child. There are also some emotional impact in terms of expectations of their child's progress and stress from the program.
Okay, so in summary, there are several ethical codes that should be used as a reference anytime that Tele-ABA services are provided. Code 1.02 requires that the behavior analysts practice within their boundaries of competence. The link telehealth.org/certified provides a database to check a specific practitioner to ensure that they have been trained and credentialed providing telehealth services. Code 1.03 requires the behavior analyst to maintain competence through professional development. And so accessing training resources to develop competence in this area could facilitate greater accessibility to families in an ethical manner. Code 2.07 requires data and records to be stored and transmitted in a manner that protects confidentiality. And so adherence to HIPAA compliant software and databases is critical anytime the ABA services are rendered via telehealth. Code 1.01 requires the behavior analyst to rely on scientific knowledge, and although initial research suggests Tele-ABA could be effective for many families, in-home-based ABA has been around much longer and has a great deal more empirical support for its use. So you might be wondering, who provides Tele-ABA services? Provided is a list of providers identified as providing Tele-ABA services at this time. And again, no mandate exists to require a BCBA to be certified in Tele-ABA. However, our ethics require that behavior analysts practice within boundaries of competence. So if a specific practitioner claims that they provide Tele-ABA and you want to know if they are certified and trained to do so, you can check the link provided at telehealth.org to check the practitioner certification in this area. You can also visit the provided link to learn more about Tele-ABA and how to provide those services. So various points can be made in support of both in-home and Tele-ABA therapy. These include issues related to accessibility, training, treatment fidelity, social validity, effectiveness of treatment, data safeguards and confidentiality, impact on the family and client, and empirical support. Ultimately, the role of the behavior analyst is to benefit the client and pursue excellence in practice. Code 2.09 requires behavior analysts to provide effective treatment with a consideration of the client's individualized needs. As such, provided that all ethical codes and principles are followed, the benefit of one form of ABA therapy versus another is really a matter of weighing the cost and benefit of each method for that individual and family that is being served. So thank you for taking the time to view our presentation, and we look forward to getting your feedback.